Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Mr. President, Excellencies.
The silence is over. From Geneva, the United Nations has just dropped a bombshell, officially demanding a full investigation into what could be one of Africa's darkest election episodes in recent memory. On October 11th, 2025, UN Rights Chief Volker Türk publicly called for independent, transparent investigations into widespread killings, disappearances and arbitrary arrests that followed Tanzania's October 29th general elections, where President Samia Suluhu Hassan claimed an impossible 97% victory after her rivals were disqualified. Türk's words are careful but cutting. Quote, "The reports are harrowing," he said. Bodies removed by security forces, families searching police stations and hospitals for missing loved ones and finding none. Unquote. The story begins with an election few believed could be free or fair. Opposition leaders were sidelined, rallies banned, and journalists silenced. When the results were announced, 97% for the incumbent, Tanzanians poured into the streets not in celebration but in anger. The protests were swift, the response brutal. Information gathered by the UN Human Rights Office from multiple sources in Tanzania paints a grim picture. Hundreds of protesters and civilians were reportedly killed. An unknown number were injured or detained, but the most disturbing detail, reports that security forces have been seen removing bodies from streets, hospitals and morgues, allegedly transporting them to the undisclosed locations to conceal evidence. Families, meanwhile, continue to search from one police station to another, one hospital to the next, hoping for closure that never comes. Türk described it bluntly, quote, "These accounts are harrowing," unquote. From Geneva, Türk has now called on the Tanzanian authorities to act, not with silence or denial, but with accountability. He urged immediate investigations into these grave allegations, insisting that all those responsible be held to account. And perhaps most importantly, he demanded that the bodies of those killed be returned to their families for dignified burials. He didn't stop there. He went further, calling for the unconditional release of all opposition figures and protesters detained before, during and after the election, among them opposition leader Tundu Lissu, who remains in custody. According to Türk's briefing, more than 150 people have been arrested since election day, many of them young protesters, some minors. The legal basis for their arrests is unclear, but several have already been charged with treason. Türk reminded the Tanzanian government that under international law, all detainees must be promptly presented before a judicial officer and allowed to contest the legality of their detention. In other words, due process isn't optional. The statement from Geneva is the strongest yet from the UN, and it lands at a time when regional institutions remain eerily quiet. The African Union has yet to issue a formal response. Neighboring governments including Kenya, Uganda and Rwanda have adopted a cautious silence, wary of appearing to meddle. But make no mistake, the ripples are already being felt across East Africa. Kenya in particular is watching this closely.
Let's look slightly beyond Kenya to the region around Kenya, and perhaps the reason people are worried about the protests in Kenya is because the picture of democracy in East Africa doesn't look particularly good. We have recent elections in Tanzania, your neighbour. The president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, the winner, declared 97% support. That's like North Korea. Is there still democracy in Tanzania?
It's not for me to judge Tanzania. It is...
It seems a bit fishy, 97%, doesn't it?
Well, in a democracy, for example, in Kenya, you can never get 96%.
So it's not a democracy anymore then?
That is you saying. Every country have a way of them doing their stuff.
The specter of state violence, mass detentions, and information blackouts evokes memories that are uncomfortably familiar. On social media, Kenyans have begun amplifying the story under the hashtag Tanzania Massacre, calling for accountability and international attention. The UN has no power to prosecute, but Turk's call could open the door for future international action, from sanctions to independent investigations. Whether Tanzania cooperates or not will determine its standing in the global community for years to come. But beyond politics, this is about human lives. Hundreds of families unable to bury their dead. Thousands who still don't know where their loved ones are. Turk's final words echo beyond Geneva. Quote, "It is essential that all those detained be afforded the full range of due process rights guaranteed under international law." Unquote. In other words, transparency isn't a favor, it is an obligation.
Jana usiku nimepata nafasi ya kuona mambo mabaya sana yaliyojitokeza. Vijana wengi wameumizwa, wameuawa. Familia nyingi zimepoteza ndugu zao. Mali zimeharibika. Kwa niaba ya chama chetu nataka kutoa pole kubwa sana kwa Watanzania wote waliopoteza ndugu zao, waliopoteza mali, hasa waliopoteza ndugu zao. Tuliwaambia mapema kwamba kuna sababu ya kurudisha taifa pamoja, hawakufanya hivi. Wamefikisha taifa letu kwenye hali mbaya na ngumu. Kwa hiyo kwa niaba ya chama chetu tunatoa pole. La pili, kama tulivyokamatwa ndivyo tulivyoachiwa. Hakuna mazungumzo yoyote tuliyofanya na mtu yoyote. Nataka hili liwe very clear kwenye public, kwa sababu watu wasilete propaganda kwamba tumeachiwa kwa makubaliano fulani. Hatuna makubaliano tulioachiwa nayo. Bado sisi ni watu tunaamini ni innocent, na tunataka watu wengine wote wanaoshikiliwa kinyume cha utaratibu waachiwe, waende kwenye familia zao. Tunataka watu wote walioachiwa, waliokamatwa, wanaobambikiwa kesi iachwe mara moja.
The UN has spoken. The world is watching. But in Tanzania, the streets remain quiet, not with peace, but with fear. The next move belongs to the government of Tanzania. And history will remember whether Samia Suluhu Hassan chose silence or accountability. What do you think about this latest move by the UN? Drop your comments. Newsroom, Maisha TV, Bushabi Jr.